going to focus on district heating as a solution to decarbonisation. Engie is the largest within this sector in terms of its city centre type schemes. So we have big schemes in the centre of Birmingham, Coventry, Leicester, and several in London. So in terms of future development, the government sees district heating as offering the potential for about 17% of heat to come from district heating as part of its long-term decarbonisation plan. But in terms of achieving that, there's a number of challenges, and some of them Hugh's touched on. I mean, first of all, in terms when we're looking at district heating, what we're competing against is a widely available gas grid in the UK, and some countries where district heating's taken off quicker haven't had the same extent of existing infrastructure installed. There's some quite high upfront costs in terms of installing district heating, not just the pipes in the ground, but building energy centres, which are largely in parallel to the existing gas and power networks. It really only works in more dense areas, urban areas, so it's not generally a solution for rural schemes. In the UK, we have the challenge that many customers are not familiar with district heating. They consider it perhaps risky compared to the more conventional options, such as having their own gas boiler or electric heating. And also you're expecting them to enter into a monopoly situation long term, albeit with some price certainty, but it makes people uncomfortable compared to what they would expect from a gas system, and they're concerned about the resiliency, even though experience shows that you can deliver equivalent reliability. And then as a developer, you have the risks around uncertain growth in the heat loads, but also in terms of what those heat loads might be in new developments. So as we get more energy efficient buildings, that may make them less viable to connect to a district heating scheme. So it's that conflict between energy efficiency and the means of energy supply. And then as an operator, you have to take on that operational performance risk on the scheme. You don't need much to go wrong before the relatively slim margins you make start to erode. There are not many district heating opportunities in the UK that are fully commercially viable in their own right. They often need either the developer to make a contribution towards the cost of the scheme, or for there to be grant money available. So at the moment, the government is awarding money under its Heat Network Investment Programme to help bridge this viability gap. But that will only help over the next 3 years, and beyond that, the industry needs to demonstrate that it can stand by itself. Because district heating is an unregulated utility, we have to secure planning rights to put networks in the ground. We have challenges in terms of building energy centres that people don't necessarily want those near their properties, and though those challenges often aren't seen by the gas or electricity companies. And then the challenge that I'll focus on in my remaining slides is the long-term carbon sustainability. As Hugh mentioned, the bulk of district heating schemes to date have been based around gas CHP, and we're still seeing gas CHP schemes installed in London. But as we look at the decarbonisation of the grid, the carbon benefit you get from the electricity generated on a CHP scheme erodes, and actually in the not too distant future will actually become carbon negative, because generating that electricity from gas will exceed the average grid carbon factor as we increasingly move towards renewables. And that's really shown within these projections that the government did a few years back. And the number on the right, the chart on the right is showing the total carbon emissions from the electricity sector over time. I think when we look 10 years ago, there was certainly some doubt as to how quickly this would occur, but certainly over the last 5 years we've seen acceleration, and actually it's been going faster than this curve suggests. And what that means is that the benefit, as I say, of CHP diminishes because we can't gain that value from the electricity generation. And there's a lot of analysis that's been done on this. There is some analysis that suggests we're already at the point where gas CHP doesn't deliver a carbon benefit against the average carbon factor of the grid. If you look at the marginal carbon emission factor for electricity, we've still got some margin there, but it is a picture that is only going in one direction, and that is towards carbon emission factor on a grid that means natural gas-fired CHP within 5 years is unlikely to deliver carbon benefit. In terms of what this means to gas CHP, the emission factors mean that it will be a higher carbon technology. For existing assets, the carbon benefits will start to diminish. And in terms of carbon reduction, alternative fuels and heat sources will become increasingly attractive. Now that's from a carbon saving perspective. You've then got all the challenges Hugh highlighted in terms of the cost and impact on grid and other systems of those changes. As an operator of district heating schemes in the UK and looking to develop new ones, therefore decarbonisation is one of the key items and risks for us as a business. This is a list of some of the options we're reviewing. If you look at a picture on the right, some of you may be familiar with that. It's the thermal store on the Pimlico scheme, district heating scheme, which was installed in the 50s. And I've put that there as an example of how the decarbonisation has already been happening on some schemes, and it wasn't down to decarbonisation as such, but a change to the sources of heat. But it has, in essence, demonstrated the process we need to go through. So initially, Pimlico was supplied from Battersea Power Station, a coal-fired scheme. When that shut, they put oil boilers in, so it was heavy fuel oil. That then converted to gas. Over time, they've installed CHP, gas CHP now, and then they're starting to look at heat pumps as being their next option, either drawing heat from the Thames or looking at air source schemes. And it's that sort of process we'll need to go through on many of the existing district heating schemes. So we're already considering alternatives to gas CHP on new projects. Predominantly it's around heat pumps. And then you come into the challenge of having enough capacity within the grid system. We are doing more through life modelling of the carbon impacts and identifying at what points we may need to change the technology. So looking at plant replacement life cycles and working towards those. So 15 years of the CHP engine, we're unlikely to put a new CHP engine in, so to plan for what that alternative may look like. Looking at the adaptability of systems, so one designed around CHP, maybe too high temperature for a heat pump scheme, so looking how we can design from the outset to enable us to make those technology changes. But it is reliant on policy support, so as it stands, the cost of decarbonising would fall on the customers, and we have to always look at the fuel poverty issues and also comparability with electricity and gas pricing, and it will need policy support around being able to achieve that. And our existing schemes, we're looking at future-proofing them. We're carrying out options appraisals across a range of technologies, and it's very dependent on where the scheme is as to what the options might be. So, for example, in Birmingham, we're looking at a connection to the energy from waste plant. On the Olympic Park, we're looking at using the water sources in the area. But we have to look at how easy it is to retrofit those, and we have existing contracts, so our pricing is limited. So how can we enable that decarbonisation to happen within the existing price structures? So some of the technologies we're looking at, and gas CHP is still there at the moment. It's a technology that is viable. It can act as that enabling technology to install a district heating system. But as just mentioned, when we're looking at it, we have to look at that adaptability and not consider that it will be through life. But we could, and at the bottom one, some of these schemes, you could use biogas, you could have carbon biogas offsets, or potentially the gas grid itself may start to decarbonise, in which case gas CHP will enable a continued carbon saving. In the right circumstances, biomass may be an option, but because of the air quality issues, we're seeing that having less potential in urban areas than it did. Heat from energy from waste is a great solution if you have an energy from waste plant close enough. In the UK, we tend to build our energy from waste plants in the middle of nowhere because of planning constraints, so there aren't many circumstances where that is an option, but it's certainly something we look at. It can give a major decarbonisation in one hit for a scheme. And then we're on to the heat pumps, which, as explained, are becoming that sort of default in terms of looking at decarbonisation, whether on a building basis or connected to a larger district heating scheme. And we have a geothermal well on our Southampton scheme, which was installed about 30 years ago, which we're just recommissioning. It's fairly limited in the UK opportunities for geothermal, but where those are available, that's also an option. But it's not just around the technology, it is about looking at the storage capacity on a scheme as well. So by having large thermal or chilled water stores, you can optimise the operation of your low carbon technology and improve the emission factor of your scheme through increasing your storage quantity. Through private wires, you can, if we're installing some of the lower carbon technologies, we can gain benefit from that electricity supply to customers and decarbonising that, as well as from low carbon heat and cooling. And then by installing smarter systems, it's about the operation of that technology to achieve more efficient and effective operation.